When looking for the king of podcasts, you're at the wrong channel.
Well, excuse me!
Looking for good ideas for life? You're far from good hands.
Hey, bud, what's your problem?
If you think the listener is always right, you're far from the right place.
Out of order! Even in the future, nothing works!
Hosted by a Northeasterner by birth, but a rebel by choice.
Are you threatening me?
If you want a host that floats between love and madness,
and we know the night is always gonna be here anyway. Thinking of you's working up my appetite. Looking forward to a little afternoon delight.
then play on and listen to Crazy Train Radio.
All right, guys, listen to this blues riff and B. Watch me for the changes and try and keep up, okay?
Warning, creators of this game do understand the subject matter may be offensive to some, but they do honor the families and people that have been affected by these real-life tragedies that these individuals have caused. Want to play a game?
Oh, yeah!
Lover of true crime?
Yes, yes, yes.
Well, we got an interesting game for you to check out.
Wow.
With the mashup of influences such as horror movies, collecting cards, and RPGs.
What?
Led to giving birth to an incredible creation of this game, Killers, the card game.
You are all my children now.
This game is a collectible trading card game featuring some of the most infamous killers, with tidbits of trivia on the back of each card to help you learn some insight to each criminal.
Who the hell are you?
Let's not forget, during the game, cops will be chasing you and these criminals.
I'm a cop, you idiot!
However, check out their website listed through all social media today, which can be found under Killers, the card game.
Am I on the internet?
I want to play a game.
This is Zak Ford. You are listening to Crazy Train Radio. I hope you enjoy the segment.
Hey folks, it's your least favorite host in the podcast world, Croc, Jonathan Steele. And boy, do we have a good one for you today. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, this next guest has a newer baseball book out titled Called Up, which is a collection of call-up and debut stories. As many folks would know, and some would be surprised, to reach the majors, a ball player must not only possess the natural ability and world-class skills to play the game, but also must overcome nearly insurmountable odds to play one game in the major leagues. So let's go ahead and welcome the author, Zak Ford.
Holy cow!
So obviously Called Up. How's the response been? How excited are you to have this out finally?
It's been an adventure, man. It's been a lot of fun. Very excited that the book has been completed, come to fruition, and it's been enjoyable last few months. Just promoting the book and letting people know about all these great inspirational stories of these people getting called up and making their major league debuts.
How long of a process was it for you from start to finish?
From the time I interviewed the first player to the when the book was actually published was about 4 years. I would say that I was probably interviewing players fairly regularly for about 2 years of that. And spent about a year or so putting together the manuscript itself after I had the contract from McFarland, maybe not quite a year. And then took about 9, 10 months after I had turned in that book manuscript before everything was complete and formatted, edited, and ready for delivery.
Yeah, because obviously the presentation was drawn on the original interviews of over 109 guys who debuted, and this is a collection that presents their first person stories on how they were called up to the league. And I appreciate that not only did you try to focus on capturing the feelings and emotions of becoming a big leaguer, but you broke it down into different ranges because obviously you're covering, say, 61 to 18, and you broke it down into 4 different time frames: 60s and 70s, 80s, 90s, and since 2000. So where did that thought process begin in terms of putting it together that way?
Originally, actually, when I turned in the manuscript, I had it in alphabetical order. With just going back and forth with the editor, wasn't overly crazy about it when I had it organized in alphabetical order. And went back and forth with the editor a little bit, over brainstormed some ideas, and ultimately we decided to go with the time frame section in those 4 chunks that you referenced. And the reason for that is when those stories are in the book, where they appear in the book, you can see different common themes throughout those particular sections. Obviously, in the 60s and 70s, people aren't getting text messages about their call up, right? There's like Jerry Royce. He found out about his call up by getting a registered letter. So, I mean, that would obviously be unheard of, over the last, 20 or 30 years, right? So I thought that, ultimately breaking them into those time frame sections, there would be different themes, about what's happening in the world, what's happening in baseball at that particular time. And I thought it was a better way to capture those stories and organize them in the most appropriate manner.
And it's funny that you mentioned Jerry, because I've had the opportunity to talk to him. Great guy. I found him to be very personable. And I know you mentioned about some of the stories that stuck out. Do you mind bringing up Jerry since you brought his name up?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So Jerry actually was a Cincinnati kid, or I'm sorry, a St. Louis kid. Ends up getting going up to the big leagues with the St. Louis Cardinals, his hometown team. He's got the notice, as I said earlier, from the registered letter, arrived. And one of the things that was very touching about his story is that when he was in that Cardinals dugout, he was looking out for his first, at his first game. He was just sitting in the Cardinals dugout, and he's looking out in the stands, and he's thinking about, just a few years ago, I was in this, in that area watching these Cardinals, play as a member of, my baseball team. His, youth baseball team had come out there, and he says that he remembers vividly looking at the players in the dugout when he was there. And then that first game, when he's on that Cardinals roster, looking out into that section of the stands and going, this is a serious role reversal here. This is pretty cool. It took a while for him to get in his first major league game, but got into a game at Jerry Park against the Expos, who were, they're in their first year that year. and ended up having a pretty good start. A couple of rain delays, but did definitely have a good major league debut against the Expos.
I wanted to backtrack because
Mhm.
I mentioned about the time periods of the
Yeah.
book, but
Okay.
I wanted to bring up about I wanted to go with the pitching joke of I want to throw a curveball in there because I should have also included about expansion, labor
Mhm.
strikes, and the multiple times that the minor leagues were restructured. So, how did that play a factor in the things you think from your research?
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely one of the reasons why I did ultimately decide to put that in the time frame section because those were some of the common themes. Your major league expansion in the 60s and 70s, and then obviously in the 90s too. You had labor issues, especially in the 80s, 90s, that call-ups that were impacted by strikes. Um, and then obviously too, the just how baseball has changed. The prominent role of pitching and relief pitchers has obviously changed how people or how organizations make up their rosters as well. So those are all factors that kind of evolve and kind of change over time. So I thought that was it was best to have the book in those time frame sections to where you could kind of see some of those connections. And I think that ultimately everything ended up working out pretty well. I was ultimately pretty happy with how things were formatted.
And obviously, do you think it was, with 109 different personalities and everything else through the errors you talk about, was there a particular error you would say was most difficult in touching base with as far as the ball players and such?
I mean, I wouldn't say, not necessarily. I mean, I think that obviously, for the older eras, just based upon the availability of players, and the a lot of these players too, I found online, through social media, and just internet searches. So, obviously, some of those players that had the earlier debuts in the '60s and '70s aren't quite as active on social media or the internet. So there's a little bit more digging involved, but there are still quite a few ball players from those eras that are found in those particular ways.
Right on. And that's how I found Jerry Royce actually
Yeah.
is. But it's funny because I know you are an avid reader as well. As you can tell,
Hmm.
I got three or four behind me.
Got some good ones.
And yeah, and I was actually talking with who's actually kind of in your area, Joe
Hmm.
Blanton.
Okay.
I guess about 3 weeks ago at this point.
Hmm.
Joe's running a winery and all up in Napa Valley. And I brought up, because I was looking at the book on the shelf, Jason Kendall's book. I don't know if you ever seen that one.
Oh yeah, like Throwback, I think it's called.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Jason Kindle's in
And
the book too. Yeah.
nice. And no, was telling Joe about it. He was telling me about the relationship him and Jason had because Jason was working in the front office and recently retired when Joe went to Kansas City at the time.
Hmm.
So I shared the book with him, and he was like, "Man, that's a great story." And I was just explaining to him how Jason talked about the game within the game,
Hmm.
and I don't think I'm speaking out of school with it, but Jason told me years ago about dealing with like ADHD and things like that, and being hyper focused, especially as a catcher,
Hmm.
where you're looking. And the catcher, I always thought had the best perspective on what is going on from a decent defensive point of view.
Yeah.
Obviously he's the one calling the game and all that kind of thing. But so I know Joe was interested in grabbing the book and all that fun stuff. So,
Nice.
well, what was it like talking to Jason? For your project,
Jason Kendall is a great guy. Chatted with
straightforward.
him. Yeah, totally cool, totally down to earth. It was like just chatting with a normal buddy.
Yeah.
I asked these players for about 15, 20 minutes, which was usually more than adequate time to cover the topics for the particular stories. And I probably talked to Jason for probably close to 45 minutes. We talked about, his experience getting called up to the big leagues and making that team out of spring training in '96 and his debut against the Marlins when he was with the Pirates. But even after I got that information, Jason was totally cool. We chatted for probably another 15, 20 minutes just about having teenage kids and chauffeuring them around. And it
Hmm.
was it was cool. It was just like talking to one of the guys.
Yeah. I put it this way, and like you said, it's like talking to one of the guys. It's like I would say Jason is one of those guys, and I like to refer to people as would I like to sit and have a beer or
Yeah.
a cocktail with as I just poured another glass. And Jason is one of those guys I always felt he's one of those cats that would love to sit and have a drink with and just you could shoot the shit with him. Like there was no ego there. There was no
Hmm.
like he was just like you said, one of the guys.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. Shoot. Had one heck of a career too. He was yeah, he is a solid player for many years.
yeah. So before I go into diving into a couple more stories, I'm curious to know your favorite baseball book is The Glory of Their Times,
Yes.
which there was a family member that gave you that, but also being a big influence was an uncle who played
Hmm.
before serving in the military for World War II, then actually tried to make a baseball comeback in spring training
Hmm.
46. Can you talk
Oh,
a little bit
absolutely.
about that?
Absolutely. Yeah, as far as those two things are probably my two main inspirations for this particular book. Glory of Their Times, a book that I discovered as a young baseball fan, that even though those players were about 100 years older than me, I was able to feel connections to them as human beings. Ritter was really good about still capturing the feeling and emotions, the behind the scenes information of their stories. So I always kind of gravitated to those. I gravitated to those first person narratives, like in The Glory of Their Times. And then, fast forward, I have, a great uncle who also played professional baseball for quite a long time, from 1937 to the mid 1950s. And he was considered a prospect in the old Pacific Coast League in the 30s, actually bought by the Red Sox. In the same deal as Dom DiMaggio after the 1939 season, and the deal was that Dom would go up to the Red Sox and he would spend at least another year with the Seals for some seasoning. And had a pretty good year. 1940, 1941. Obviously, things kind of changed. Plans changed. Went to spring training with the Red Sox. Did not make the team out of spring training, and then obviously a few months later ended up going into the service. Went back into baseball 1946. Spring training with the Red Sox, made the team out of spring training. However, the Red Sox got off to a really hot start, and the services of a rookie who was nearly 32 years old weren't really needed. So he ended up getting released before getting into a game. The next day, he was picked up by the crosstown Boston Braves, and the same thing happened after about a week or two. And got sent down. Active major leaguer for a few weeks, but never got a stat line. And I know that disappointment was something that he held. I wish that I had still kind of asked him about those few weeks, what his experience was. Obviously, he's long gone. I don't have that ability. But just thinking about his experience, thinking about that particular time, what he had gone through to make that major league roster, even though he did not end up getting into a game, I think was something that very important to me, and an inspiration, like I said, for the called up book.
And it's funny that when I was reading that about your great uncle, that reminded me of a couple books I got behind me somewhere.
Mhm.
I got pile sticking out here and all, folks, but there's a
Yeah.
couple baseball books that I have, and I'm not sure if you've ever heard of the man, G.P. Hutchinson, who
Doesn't ring a
did.
bell.
Okay, so he did a couple baseball related novels, but talking about the era of like the teens and the 20s and even
Huh.
into the 30s and 40s up until the war period, give or take a
Mm.
couple years there. But I will definitely send them over to you. But they're called Picked Off, Dead Ball, and Over the Right Field Wall, and it talks about
Interesting.
that. Yeah, they're pretty good books, and he uses a lot of history with those, to tell that story in novel form.
Mhm.
We're talking, a lot of St. Louis, say some Boston, some, maybe 1919 Sox, and what I mean, just a lot of that era. So,
Yeah.
but I'll actually connect you with Gary. He's a good dude. Knows it. He knows his stuff of the game and such. So,
Very cool.
yeah.
And you said the guy, his name was Gary Hutchinson?
Yes.
Very cool. I'll have to
He,
look him up
he
too.
puts it as GP Hutchinson, but I'll send you links and connect you with him. I think you'll like the cat, being a historical guy that
Okay.
you.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, no problem. So, speaking of the history, which is kind of cool, and that's kind of my bag, you are a part of Society of American Baseball Research, as well as you mentioned earlier, the Pacific Coast League Historical Society. So, what do those two groups do?
Mhm. So, Society for American Baseball Research is a international organization where it's an international community of baseball historians, baseball researchers, baseball fans at all different levels. A lot of people are obviously interested in stats nowadays. That is a component, a popular component of a lot of members within that organization. But I've always been more gravitated to Society for American Baseball Research just for the stories, the baseball stories, those first person human interest stories. That's been my interest more than any kind of statistics or academic level, research. Is that human element of baseball. But Saber gives an opportunity for all sorts of different baseball fans to be engaged within the sport, within their community. I'm chair of the Dusty Baker Sacramento Saber chapter, and Saber chapters are named typically after prominent baseball figures in the particular regions. So it's not necessarily, we don't have coordination with Dusty, but definitely is somebody who we have semi-regular communication with, just kind of give them a heads up. But it's Society for American Baseball Research is just a great community for baseball fans of all different kinds to get together and kind of nerd out about the great game of baseball. The Pacific Coast League Historical Society is a organization that helps preserve the history of the rich Pacific Coast League, which was the prominent baseball league on the Pacific Coast prior to the move of the Dodgers and Giants. So, as I had referenced earlier, my great uncle was a former Coast League ball player. So, as a kid, I'd go to his reunions. I'd become friends with some of his old teammates and opponents, and it just kind of grew a love for the old Pacific Coast League, a love for interviewing ball players, and that time of the game as well. So both of those things are inspirations and help me in the development of this book as well.
And speaking of Dusty, I was obviously, as a player, he was part of the, if I remember correctly, the 81 Dodgers World Series.
Mm-hmm.
But to see him win it as a manager, because I always thought he was a great manager.
Yeah.
But for him to win it in 2022 against the Phillies, even don't tell nobody, I won't, that I'm actually an Orioles guy, but live in the Philadelphia area. I won't let that cat out of the bag. But I was happy to see Dusty get the ring. So then walk off into the sunset, enjoy retirement and all. But because the name of society up in your neck of the woods, he was into the wine game as well, isn't he? If I remember correctly.
The wine game? Yes, he actually has Baker Family Wines. He has his own winery. In fact, I actually just went to the 4-year anniversary just within the last month or two at his winery. And he's not somebody that's going to be in retirement and just kicking back.
Yeah.
No, he has numerous business ventures. He got his winery. Now he signed up as a special assistant with the San Francisco Giants. So as a Giants fan, it's nice that he's back in the Giants organization too. Dusty is one of my all-time favorite baseball guys, dating back to the 80s, really.
Yeah, when I said retirement, folks, obviously you just heard from.
Oh yeah,
Zach.
retirement from on the field,
from the
man.
managing. Yes,
Yeah.
I just want to make that. So, obviously, I pointed out a couple of stories that I wanted to talk about, but I'm curious before we touch into those, unless they are some of the ones that stand out. But who do you think is the most surprising story told or that you've talked to in putting this book together?
Looking at the list of the players, you could tell, that, I didn't go after Hall of Famers or players that required a publicist or, an agent or something to make that particular contact. A lot of these ball players, had successful baseball careers, but, they're not necessarily household names per se. That said, there were definitely a few stories that I was aware of that I really wanted to have captured in this particular book. The main one that comes to mind is the story of Adam Greenberg. I'm not sure if you've heard of Adam Greenberg, but Adam Greenberg came up in 2005 with the Chicago Cubs. He came up from Double-A with Chicago, and made his major league debut as a pinch hitter against the Marlins. And very first pitch of his very first major league at bat, he got beaned, and it was a bad beaning. It wasn't just something that impacted his baseball career; it impacted his life off the field as well. Had to make some adjustments. Struggled to try and get back on the major league field. It wasn't able to. Even spent some time in independent league baseball. About 7 or 8 years later, after that beaning happened, there was a one at bat campaign. Somebody reached out to him, basically wanting to be his agent and say, "Hey, look, we need to bring your story. Make more people aware of your story. Try and get you one at bat, right?" And he's still plugging away. He's still playing ball. He's playing with Team Israel, and the Marlins end up going down, sending a scout to see him, and he ends up getting a contract with the Marlins. Marlins were the team that he was, facing when he did get beat. And he's able to get that one at bat. Towards the end of the year, he gets in, pinch hitter, and he's facing R.A. Dickey. R.A. Dickey was nearly unhittable that year. He won the Cy Young Award, and he was just mowing everybody down. So Adam Greenberg gets his at bat. It's against R.A. Dickey, and Greenberg strikes out on 3 pitches, but he ends up still getting a standing ovation by the Marlins crowd because they knew his story. They knew what he went through. They knew the dedication and perseverance that he showed to get back to the major league field and get that one at bat. So he still ended up getting a standing ovation. So that's one story that kind of stands out to me because it had, some ups and downs. It is one of the few stories where I actually included 2 different call-ups. If a ball player had spent 5 years or more outside of Major League Baseball, I ended up including a second call-up as well if they had spent a substantial amount of time in the minor leagues trying to get back. But Greenberg's story is the one that definitely stands out for me.
Well, because I got to ask, because like I said, I'm in the Philadelphia area and obviously know the name. Mm-hmm. And he was part of the 80 World Series team and such, Randy Lerch, who is now, if I remember correctly, and I know you said he lives close by, but I believe he's running a construction company, correct? Out your way?
Randy is actually retired now.
Oh, nice.
He was in construction, yeah. He was in construction, retired a few years back.
Nice. So, what was it about Randy's story? If I remember correctly, the story, and please correct me if I'm wrong, which I've been
Mhm.
known to do once in a while, is he was sitting in the stands and he was watching Carlton pitch with Bob Boone and all, and Dallas Green ends up coming to tell him, "Hey, you're going to the big leagues, kid."
Hmm. Yeah. He he actually how he originally found out is that he was actually in Double A with the Reading Phillies,
Hmm.
and they made the playoffs, and he had a great game. He ended up pitching like 14 innings or something like that in a playoff game, and Dallas Green, who was the minor league farm director at the time, was there watching the game, and saw this 20-year-old kid just mowing down people for 14 innings and said, okay, well, you're going to be a September call up. And he ends up going to, the Phillies and one of the first games he watches is that Carlton game. And they are trying to figure out how to get him on that 40-man roster at that particular time, the active roster. I'm sorry. But eventually he gets into his first major league game at Wrigley Field. In fact, he actually comes in for Carlton, which possibly was Carlton's next start. I'll actually read a little excerpt from his story here. We were in Chicago playing the Cubs, and the wind was blowing out about 20 miles an hour at Wrigley Field, like it does that time of the year. Carlton was pitching at Jim. It was the ninth inning, and the Phillies were winning 13-2. Danny Ozark says, "Get Lurch up." I ended up getting into the game, and by the time I got done giving up a windblown grand slam to Tim Housley, the score was 13-7. I almost lost it for him in the ninth. I remember Jose Cardinal threw his bat at a ball. It was way away, and I think it was even a breaking ball. He hit it, and the bat was coming while the bat was coming out of his hand, just good enough for it to loop over the second baseman's head. I said to myself, if they're going to hit him like that up here, you're in the wrong league, son. So he had a little interesting orientation to his big league start, Randy Lurch did.
And the other things I definitely wanted to bring up was there was a couple Orioles stories because, like I said, yeah, I'm an Orioles guy. Grew up watching Cal Ripken, all that fun stuff. But the one story in particular that I laughed because I know guys of those older generations, and the ribbing or the practical jokes really, I won't say, and I know, God, I know I'm going to get a phone call when I say this, but I know of stories of, say, that Sparky Lyle in the 70s and other guys would do that obviously you couldn't get away with today. But I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm old school and would love to pull those kind of pranks. But we're in a different time, different place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think you're probably referring to Bobby Grich. Bobby Grich, who came up with the 1970 Orioles. The Orioles were just stacked at that
At
particular
that
time,
time
and in
period,
fact, they were even stacked at the minor league level too, with the Rochester Red Wings. He had an incredible minor league team there, and I think he had Don Baylor batting behind him. He was batting something like 380 or something like that when he got called up. And was told by Cal Ripken Sr. He, makes the journey over to Memorial Stadium, and one of the first things he does is, while he's walking to that locker room, he sees an office door that says manager's office. It's cracked open a little bit. He peeks his head in there, and he sees Earl Weaver. He figures he might as well introduce himself, so he, kind of gives it a little tap, make sure he's noticed. Gives a little courtesy tap and just says, hi, my name is, Bobby Grich. I'm here to report for my first day in the big leagues. And we all know Earl Weaver is known as a very warm and fuzzy, welcoming guy, right?
No, not Whirl.
I'm being very sarcastic, right?
Just a little bit.
Earl Weaver's kind of known as, a hard-nosed guy, old school guy. And he just, looks up at him, doesn't get out of his, chair or anything like that, and just says, okay, do you have anything else to tell me? He didn't say, this is going to be, congratulations, this is going to be your role, give him an orientation. It was very old school. His introduction to Earl Weaver and the big leagues. He ends up taking the bus over to Washington, and he's playing the pitcher for Washington that particular day was a guy by the name of Casey Cox. Casey Cox actually went to the same high school Bobby Grich did. Few years older, but same high school, which is a pretty unique connection, thousands of miles away from California. But he goes 0 for 3 with a walk. And the next day there's a cake sitting in the locker room for Bobby that says, "Welcome to Baltimore, Bobby." And I can read the excerpt for you of, the next steps after he discovers that cake. It says, Frank Robinson and all the other guys came in. He says, "Who bakes a cake for somebody who gets a walk? You did nothing last night. You only got a walk. What's this cake all about?" He was giving me a hard time. And I said, "Well, everybody come on in. Just let's have a piece of cake." Pete Richard took a piece of cake and took a bite. He goes, "Wait a minute. That's sour cream. Dude, smell that." I started to smell it. And he says, "No, put your nose down a little bit closer." I heard somebody giggle, and I knew then it was a setup. And they were going to smash my face into that cake if I got close enough. My instincts picked up on it. I jumped away, but he tried to push me down. Only the tip of my nose hit it, but that was it. So he didn't get me. That was the first time I'd seen that prank. And anytime we had a rookie being called up during the season from there on out, I was in on it. We got a lot of rookies after that. They would go over, smell the cake, and somebody would come from behind and smash their face into it. So that's
now
Bobby
I'm
Grich.
going to have to call Jim Palmer on that one, right?
What's that?
I'm going to have to text or call Jim Palmer on that one because he was part of those great teams.
Yeah. He would have been, Jim Palmer would have definitely been around for those great Oriole teams, and probably was around for hazing, creating some of those cakes for those rookies as they were called up.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's all him, but with a nickname of Cakes, just
I didn't know that. That'd be a pretty big coincidence.
Yeah, I'm not gonna connect the dots here, but that man had some great Earl Weaver stories as well. But oh hell. So if folks want to, we could sit here and talk baseball all night and all that fun shit. But if folks want to grab the book, what's your best recommendation to do so?
If folks are interested in the book, they could go to calledupproject.com. There I have a little bit more information about the book. I have some links to social media that I've been maintaining where people can get connected as well about the book and to me. And then there's obviously an order options as well. So whether or not you want to get it direct from the publisher, McFarlane, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, your local independent bookstore, all of those possible ordering options are available at calledupproject.com. Folks there's also, I want to make note too, that there are ebook versions too. So if somebody wants to, read it on Kindle or Nook, those are available options.
Nice. Well, Zach, thank you so much for the time.
Thanks so much, man. I appreciate it.
Hey there, Friday fans. We know how much you enjoy the movies. Enjoy grabbing your Friday merchandise and interacting with the Friday family, whether it be at conventions or during our particular watch-alongs. Well, when you're looking to get yourself masks, why not check out our friends over at Camp Blood Customs out of New York State and order your specific custom mask from any of the films. All orders are made specifically. Your needs and wants are. Make sure you find Camp Blood Customs on Facebook, Instagram, and all over social media and order yours today.
Hi, I'm Bill Ripkin, and you're listening to Crazy Train Radio.